There is a version of John McEnroe that people think they know. The tantrums, the arguments, the racket smashing, the "you cannot be serious" moment that became bigger than tennis itself. People watched all of that and assumed they understood him. They didn't. Because what drove John McEnroe was never anger for the sake of anger. It was something deeper, something more personal. A standard he held so fiercely that anything falling short of it, a bad call, a dishonest opponent, a system that rewarded the wrong things, genuinely offended him at his core. John McEnroe felt everything, every injustice, every slight, every moment where the game didn't operate the way he believed it should. And for certain people, specific people who represented everything he couldn't stand, that feeling went beyond frustration, beyond rivalry. It became something personal, something that never fully went away even decades later. This is the story of one man. The man John McEnroe truly hated more than anyone he ever faced in his career. Not disliked, not found difficult, genuinely, deeply, completely hated. Understanding why tells you everything about who John McEnroe really was and what tennis really meant to him. Ask anyone who covered tennis in the 1980s. Ask the players who were there. Ask McEnroe himself on his best days when the honesty comes out raw and unfiltered. The answer is always the same. Ivan Lendl. The relationship between John McEnroe and Ivan Lendl was not a rivalry in the traditional sense. It was something colder, something that went beyond competition into genuine personal animosity that neither man bothered to hide. McEnroe and Lendl were opposites in every way that mattered. McEnroe was art. Lendl was machine. McEnroe felt everything and showed everything. Lendl felt nothing, or at least showed nothing. McEnroe played tennis like it was a conversation, spontaneous and alive and different every single time. Lendl played tennis like it was an engineering problem to be solved with the same solution applied repeatedly until it worked. And it worked. That was the part McEnroe could never accept. The tension between them didn't begin with a single match or a single moment. It built slowly, the way real hatred always builds, match by match, year by year. Small moments accumulating into something that couldn't be undone. Early in Lendl's career, McEnroe was already the established star, world number one, the most talented player on the planet by almost any measure. Lendl was coming up, this robotic Czechoslovakian baseline machine grinding his way through matches that McEnroe found almost offensive to watch. No flair, no creativity, just heavy topspin, deep balls, relentless physical pressure, and an expression that never changed no matter what was happening. McEnroe looked at that game and didn't respect it, couldn't respect it. His tennis was instinctive, creative, filled with touches and angles that came from somewhere you couldn't train. Lendl's tennis was manufactured, built in a gym, constructed on a practice court, engineered for a maximum efficiency and minimum beauty. To McEnroe, and that wasn't tennis. That was something else pretending to be tennis. What made it worse was that Lendl knew exactly what he was doing. The emotionless face wasn't an accident. It was a weapon. Lendl had studied McEnroe the way a scientist studies a specimen. He knew the volatility. He knew the emotional dependency. He knew that if he could stay perfectly still while McEnroe burned himself up with passion and frustration, eventually the match would turn in his favor. It was cold. It was calculated. And it worked with a consistency that drove McEnroe to the edge of madness. If there is one moment that defines the McEnroe-Lendl hatred, one match that crystallized everything between them into something permanent and irreversible, it is the 1984 French Open Final. And even now, 4 decades later, McEnroe cannot talk about it without something darkening in his eyes. Going into that final, McEnroe was having the greatest season any tennis player had ever produced. 82 wins, 3 losses, the entire year. He was playing at a level that observers said might never be matched. The French Open final against Lendl was supposed to be the crowning moment, the one Grand Slam missing from his collection. Clay was not McEnroe's best surface, but he was so far above everyone else that year, it almost didn't matter. He won the first 2 sets. Comfortably. The match was over in every way except the scoreboard. Lendl was supposed to crumble. Everyone expected it. McEnroe expected it. Then something happened. Something that McEnroe would describe as the single greatest betrayal he ever experienced on a tennis court. Not from Lendl directly, but from himself. A television camera caught him at a changeover, clearly distracted, clearly losing focus at exactly the wrong moment. And whatever happened internally in those minutes between the second and third set, something shifted. The lead disappeared. The momentum reversed. Lendl, who had been a dead man walking, suddenly came alive. Lendl won the next 3 sets, 3-6, 2-6, 6-4, 7-5, 7-5. The comeback was staggering. The match that should have been McEnroe's greatest triumph became his most devastating defeat. McEnroe was crushed. Not just by the loss. Losses happen, even to the greatest players. He was crushed by how it happened. By the feeling that something had been taken from him, not by superior tennis, but by superior psychology. Lendl hadn't outplayed him. Lendl had outlasted him, had waited for the crack, and then walked straight through it. That felt like theft to McEnroe. That felt personal. He never won the French Open. That 1984 final remains the closest he ever came. And Lendl was the reason. That is not something McEnroe forgot. Not in a year. Not in a decade. Not ever. Sport has a cruel way of making hatred concrete. You can try to dismiss someone. You can tell yourself their game is in real tennis, that their titles don't count the same way, that something about what they do doesn't deserve the respect the scoreboard gives it. And then the numbers keep coming, and eventually the numbers are impossible to dismiss. Lendl won 8 Grand Slams. He held the world #1 ranking for 270 weeks, a record at the time. He won the French Open 3 times, the US Open 3 times, the Australian Open twice. He reached the Wimbledon final twice, losing both times, which became a sore point he never fully resolved. Against McEnroe specifically, the head-to-head record that McEnroe found most difficult to process, Lendl won 21 of their 36 matches. In Grand Slam matches specifically, Lendl dominated. The 1985 US Open Final. The 1986 US Open Final. Matches where McEnroe had everything to prove, and Lendl had the answer every time. McEnroe's frustration wasn't irrational. It was rooted in something genuine. He believed, and the belief was not without foundation, that he was the more talented player. That the tennis he produced on his best days was superior to anything Lendl could create. And he was probably right. But tennis doesn't only reward talent. It rewards consistency, discipline, the ability to perform the same way on the worst day that you perform on the best day. Lendl had that. McEnroe, for all his genius, didn't always. That gap between talent and results was the source of the hatred, because every time Lendl beat him, it felt like an argument McEnroe couldn't win, even though he believed he was right. Beyond tennis, beyond results, beyond rivalries, the hatred between McEnroe and Lendl was also simply personal. They were people who genuinely could not stand each other as human beings. McEnroe valued authenticity above almost everything. Feel it, show it, say it. The mask offended him. Lendl's blank face, his robotic press conferences, his carefully controlled public persona. McEnroe saw all of it as dishonesty, as a performance of a different kind. If McEnroe's passion was genuine, then Lendl's absence of visible passion was also a choice, a strategic choice. And McEnroe found that manipulative in a way he couldn't forgive. There was also the question of likability. McEnroe was polarizing. People loved him or hated him depending on their tolerance for chaos. But the passion was real. The emotion was real. Even when he was wrong, he was genuinely wrong. Lendl was a never wrong in public because he never committed to anything in public. He gave nothing away. And crowds could feel that. Crowds never fully warmed to Lendl the way they warmed to McEnroe or Connors or even Borg. McEnroe noticed that. And while he would never admit it directly, because admitting it would give Lendl something, it bothered him that someone he considered a lesser personality was winning more often than he deserved. The relationship was never repaired in any meaningful way. Other rivalries softened over time. McEnroe and Connors found a kind of mutual respect that made them friends in later years. McEnroe and Borg became genuinely close. But McEnroe and Lendl, the distance remained. Polite on the surface when required, cold underneath always. Here is the deeper truth about why McEnroe hated Lendl the way he did. It wasn't just about results or personality or that French Open final. It was about what Lendl represented for the future of tennis. Lendl was the first modern professional. The first player who approached the sport entirely as a system to be optimized. Diet, fitness, practice structure, mental preparation, tactical analysis. He treated all of it with a seriousness that the previous generation hadn't matched. He hired coaches specifically for clay, specifically for grass. Nay, he studied opponents with a thoroughness that was almost scientific. He essentially invented what professional tennis preparation looks like in the modern era. And it worked. And because it worked, everyone followed. The generation after Lendl, Courier, Agassi eventually, then the next wave, all trained the way Lendl trained. All prepared the way Lendl prepared. The game moved in his direction, away from the instinctive artistry that McEnroe represented and toward the systematic excellence that Lendl had pioneered. McEnroe could feel that shift happening in real time, could feel the game changing into something that rewarded what he had the least of, discipline and system, and rewarded less what he had the most of, instinct and creativity. Lendl wasn't just beating him in matches. Lendl was winning the argument about what tennis should be. That, more than anything, is why the hatred ran so deep. You can accept losing to someone better. You can even accept losing to someone luckier. But losing to someone whose very success argues against everything you believe, that stays with you. That becomes something you carry. John McEnroe carried it for 40 years. He carries it still. 5 players pushed McEnroe to his limits. Borg brought out his greatest tennis. Connors brought out his greatest fights. Wilander brought out his greatest patience. Edberg brought out his greatest respect. Lendl brought out something else. Something rawer. Something that never softened into admiration or nostalgia the way the other rivalries eventually did. Because Lendl didn't just beat McEnroe, he contradicted him. He proved, again and again on the biggest stages in the sport, that the systematic could defeat the spontaneous, that the engineered could outlast the inspired. John McEnroe never accepted that conclusion, not on a tennis court, not in the decades that followed. And that refusal, that stubborn, passionate, completely genuine refusal, tells you everything you need to know about what made him one of the greatest players who ever lived, and everything you need to know about why Ivan Lendl was the one he truly hated most.